Greetings citizens of the world, this is a message to Australia. A message to its leaders, government bodies and citizens. We have been following recent events in Australia and a handful of anonymous members who have been outing the location of illegal governmental activity on social media. This social media push on Twitter tags of Adelaide along with the occurrence of that illegal governmental activity that was a citywide surveillance of harassment and annoyance experienced during the Walk Together March and again the Million Mask March 2014 in Adelaide, South Australia has brought to our attention the illegal use of telecommunications equipment in the surveillance, defamation, abuse, harassment and annoyance of civilians and torture of one particular individual. Our investigations into these events have uncovered what is seemingly the worst case of human rights abuse we have heard of in recent times and the first factual case that such technology has been used on civilians. A matter that concerns us all. We will not point fingers here at the governmental body committing the offence, for they are yet to be identified. This being said, they can only be of one source and possibly working together with the Defence Directorate. Given the scale and magnitude of what has been witnessed during the Walk Together March and the Million Mask March in Adelaide, we are here to out the vile history of this illegal activity and politicians whom have condoned the activity even upon witnessing it firsthand, firstly during question time in June and again several more times in September, as well as on public occasions. The target of this massive, very public illegal surveillance that encompasses an entire city and finds all in the immediate surroundings, victim to the amateur auditory annoyance along with harmful EMF bursts from telecommunications equipment, is a foreign national, a father, a school teacher whose only crime is his intimate knowledge of their criminal history for more than half a decade, throughout 4 other nations, on its civilians, including children, and with ability to implicate them in the near death of his daughter, whom survived a deadly burst of EMF thanks to his quick thinking and performance of CPR in Bandung, Indonesia so many years ago now, on the 3rd of January 2009. Today in the present in Adelaide, South Australia, what you are seeing is the escalation of what began from a very isolated personal attack to a very public one, of a father, alone, now in the country of his birth after 2 years, and the failure of state and federal police, human rights organizations, OIGIS, the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence, to succession in leadership in your governments, and all members of the general public whom have met him since he arrived in Australia December of 2012, coming from Thailand, where the activity was much more sinister and malicious. In Thailand they had targeted an entire school and surrounding community, targeting even school children. This was not the first time or first country since that initial attack in Bandung, Indonesia. The individual at the heart of this, in his pursuit of justice and personal security, has prayed, hoped for, and been failed by the internal security of the sovereignties of Malaysia and Japan. Japan too has seen the targeting of school children. He was left no opportunity after the failure of the internal security of Thailand but to address the matter directly, which found him embarking alone to Australia. His arrival brought with it this illegal activity you are seeing now on the streets of Adelaide, South Australia, and that has been seen in almost all small towns in South Australia, the Northern Territory, the ACT, and region Victoria, in the past 2 years. It is after 2 years of failure in your national security, where state and local police have failed to document the activity, to be passed up the chain to the Inspector General of Intelligence, whom job it is, as a watchdog of the intelligence and security community, as well as the Defence Directorate, whom has failed to address the matter brought to her office on 4 separate written occasions. This brings us to the problem at the heart of the failures of Australia's government in the provision of national security and protection of its citizens. The history of this illegal activity since its arrival on your shores. December 2012. The mass illegal surveillance and malicious use of telecommunications equipment in the very public harassment, defamation, torture of one man and the annoyance of the general public in his vicinity, who fall prey also to the harmful EMF attacks. And yes. The very use of this technology on civilians, the unknowing general public, and that very personal attack is the motivation for what you are witnessing today. The brutality of one man by the very technology he knew of, that he would not condone the use of, refused not pursue justice to rid it from humanity. A kind of rubbing his nose in it, don't you think? And in Fusel in late December of 2012, he arrived in Canberra, Australia, wrongfully assuming that his presence alone and the very public, malicious nature of the attack and activity would be enough to herald a prompt public response and police questioning. He did not expect what we call bystander effect. Nevertheless, he set about addressing the then Prime Minister Julia Gillard, members of Parliament, along with other government agencies. At the same time miraculously securing much-needed employment with IFS Integrated Facility Services in Canberra. Those letters would fall on blind eyes, their words reaching deaf ears, with the only reply coming from the Attorney General's Department. The Attorney General Department issuing a statement that he was required to address OIGIS, the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence. Bystander effect saw all those around him stand by and watch daily, amazingly withstanding the audible and EMF emission harassment to them very selves. He addressed OIGIS in writing to no avail. He then set out canvassing the media in early 2013, but by mid-2013 receiving only one response from Today Tonight Sydney, who did not follow through with their initial interest. Desperate, he reached out to the Australian Federal Police, but when the territory manager he gave as witness to verify the activity lied out of fear of involvement, they too failed to address the matter. The manager, in the wake of his perjury to Australian Federal Police, sought in providing him with employment in Adelaide, South Australia, in a governmental facility, the Department of Immigration in Kilburn, Adelaide. Bystander effect again saw him work daily in a government facility, abused all the while CO workers putting up with the annoyance of the illegal activity, even making it worse. During his brief employment here, he approached Amnesty International in Adelaide, whom said they could not help even after witnessing the behavior. They informed him that he would have to submit a case for intervention and protection. Police would have to document the activity, which for 9 months they had failed to do. His employment ended in Adelaide and he headed to Darwin in search of employment. Wanting to rid himself of being a victim of the bystander effect, he set himself up as a subcontractor, quickly getting work with Absolute Domestics and also Edna's Cleaning Services. After a year in Australia, which by now had passed, his marriage failed with his refusal to return home to Thailand. His refusal to give up on justice, to surrender his humanity and that of his children. He again wrote letters to human rights organizations and OIGIS. He also brought it to the attention of the Australian Federal Police in Darwin, Northern Territory. Upon witnessing the illegal activity, they conducted an interview at the AFP building at Darwin International Airport. The building was targeted the entire time during the interview, that found as a result being told to address the matter to AFP Canberra as they were merely aviation. It met also with the detective yelling on the way out that what they were experiencing was too much for just one man. To add insult to the tortured. This failure if the AFP saw him return to Adelaide, South Australia. He wrote to inform the Prime Minister, now the Honourable Tony Abbott, of the illegal activity undermining his authority and leadership, and targeting his own citizens, and the tortuous nature of being at the heart of the conflict. By now he was working as a subcontractor again in Adelaide for Exit Clean. By endeavour he found a private detective willing to help in Sydney. Being all alone, he was praying for an independent witness report. He made the long trip to Sydney, stopping to attend question time in Parliament House on the 24th of June 2014. On this evening the few remaining members of Parliament, including the Parliament Secretary and the Labour member for Canberra, got to hear, witness the auditory annoyance, part of the tortuous illegal surveillance of the individual. They, nor security, would act accordingly to the illegal activity. The private detective in Sydney would not live up to his word, and on 26 June 2014 the individual attended question time in Parliament tacitly in hopes the government and federal police would react to the illegal activity on this occasion. On this day in their House of Representatives, the Prime Minister Tony Abbot was in attendance, and indeed was again intruded upon by the illegal activity. Security showed its presence on the floor of the House of Representatives upon the departure of the Prime Minister of Tony Abbot from question time. Security did not act to intervene or even question the target of the abuse, whom was able to walk out again, from a situation that would seem to be of national interest. The individual returned to Adelaide, and in September of this year the individual, became fed up with the fight to keep himself alive financially, penning letters again to the AFP Canberra and OIGIS before quitting his job and heading to Sydney, in hopes of media involvement. After 2 weeks he was let down by all television networks, and amazing to arranged interview on the 26th of August 2014 at the ABC studios found the entire lobby, including the ABC 24 team, live to air, targeted by the annoyance of the audible component and EMF of the surveillance. He was indeed stood up by the investigative journalist in the lobby. Fear. Perhaps. Returning to Canberra once more, he attended question time on the 1st and again on the 2nd of September. On this occasion the Honourable Prime Minister Tony Abbot fell prey to the annoyance of that vile commentary annoyance after 37 minutes and responded to it. "What was that you said?" That disgusted the opposition. Pity the microphone was switched off. Also, a pity, lip readers exist. Was it an asexual something? Not very honourable of you. But seriously, imagine it was something you must withstand 24 hours a day, at your workplace, a school, perhaps, in your home, among your children. Not to mention the very lethal nature, capabilities, that is the true purpose in his presence, a hostage. Also, considering that you knew nothing of them, this government agency's conduct for over half a decade, at home in Australia and in 4 other nations, victimizing the general public, representing your foreign policy of inhumanity, I quests, who does run your nation? They also care less for the sanctity of Parliament House, nor you. It stands to reason that the individual whom it is directed at, and the reason for it, is seemingly more important than you, and the proceedings of question time. Such disregard would indicate that is of dire national importance, wouldn't you think? The individual also staged a 2-hour-a-day sitting protest outside the building of the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, each day taking a seat outside at the disused bus stop in hopes that annoyance of the EMF attacks and the auditory nonsense on the employers whilst present would find a proactive response to that latest complaint issued just 2 weeks earlier and sitting in their offices. A 4th complaint over 2 years that explain the very reason, history and nature of what they were now experiencing firsthand, 2 years after the initial complaint. A complaint that implicates the culprits in attempted murder of a child and seemingly the motivation together with his knowledge of their criminal history. What was the result was after a week of experiencing it firsthand, they, instead of doing their job, they called the AFP to ask him to persist from sitting outside those 2 hours, each day. Now, really? Calling the AFP to ensure you do not have to do your job? That is lazy. Or is it that you are criminally negligent for ignoring the many complaints issued you over the 2 years? The knowledge that he is isolated in Australia, besieged by the abuse, and the hope that he will succumb to it, the torturous activity, so as you are never yourself investigated. That heralded another AFP failure. He would return to Parliament House once again to ensure all knew that the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security's office had done nothing to put an end to it. And yet again that failure and theirs found him subjected to this inhumanity in the gallery of both the House of Representatives and Senate on the 22nd and 25th of September. So it is that the victim, his treatment is well known to all parliamentary members, members of security, and public servants of Parliament House. A matter that breaches 26 counts of human rights abuse in reference to the International Human Rights Bill. An illegal surveillance and use of telecommunications equipment on civilians that has plagued 5 nations, businesses, schools, children, and the general public in all those nations. A matter that dictates Australia's foreign policy towards children, families, citizens abroad. He departed back to Adelaide, where on his he received a letter from the Attorney General's Department who the Prime Minister Tony Abbot had directed to respond to the letter he had received 2 months early from the him, explaining the criminal government activity he had witnessed. A letter in which, I guess the Prime Minister was hoping to distance himself and Parliament from what they had witnessed. A letter stating that there was little that could be done to assist given the failure of OIGIS and federal police. Really? The Prime Minister, whom is the head of both the Defence Force and the Intelligence and Security Agency, is unable to prompt an immediate investigation into the criminal activity that is affecting not only the individual but also members, the civilians of his own nation. And yes, we do remember the grand speech in which you stated that the first rule of government was the protection and security of its citizens. A speech you gave all the whilst tolerating the annoyance of that torturous audible intrusion in the House of the Representatives as the victim was in the gallery. Really? Shocking, Mr. Abbott. As you preach about a death cult thousands of miles away, you stand there witnessing and a torture cult harassing, slandering a witness, a victim in the gallery. A torture cult that has ravished its way across 5 nations, on women, children, schools, and the key to it all is sitting meters away in plain view. A victim at the mercy of a torture cult that hails from your very government agencies, in your Parliament House. Obviously you knew you were lying before. And whilst you said it. Since that hogwash, that is that letter, the individual of this governmental abuse has openly approached Port Adelaide Police, Mount Barker Police and Parks Police in Adelaide, all of which have refuted to document the activity, considering they are the little people, or that the government can do as it pleases to its citizens, for he must deserve it. Media has not attempted to cover the story even in Darwin and Sydney, where they have experienced the activity, and in Adelaide after its occurrence at the Walk Together March, in which TV personalities were present along with the Governor of Adelaide and 2 Green senators. The victim now awaits a response from the South Australian Police Ombudsman to the non-action of local police to document the activity so that the hierarchy of Australia internal nationality security cogs can turn and is able to provide protection to its civilians where the government condones it. Our message to the police officers of Adelaide, to the federal police is simple. Act. Be the law. Protect and serve. Without you all our lives are frail and open to corruption by criminality. You are the first wave in the internal national security. It is you when the government fails that can uphold our civil liberties and rights. You are not little people. You have the ability to document illegal tortuous activity, even though you cannot investigate once the culprits have been identified as part of the intelligence and security community. But document you must. You documenting the activity will also provide the victim with the ability to seek aid for human rights organizations, a small compensation in the wake of such much brutality. To the media of Adelaide, whom we are flabbergasted by, why have you not tried to save the victim and protect the community from this that plagues the very streets of your city daily? An illegal government activity some of you have witnessed. Why do you ignore a man, a father, alone, besieged due to knowledge of their crimes? Why is he not allowed his basic human rights, to return home unmolested, to his children, his life, family and peace? To the Australian government leaders, senators, many of you for your inaction witnessed by countless members of security, booked viewing public, international delegates and visitors. Your days representing that fine, beautiful nation, are numbered. You will be held accountable for this crime against humanity that breaches 26 counts of the International Human Rights Bill, along with United Nations General Assembly amendments in relation to surveillance And lastly, Article 117 of the Australian Constitution. I do see prison time ahead. To the victim. The witness, that the government and intelligence community fear so much as dedicate such resources, such money to keep from the public the truth. A man that can prove the criminality of government agencies' abuse of human rights across 5 nations, incriminating further politicians and intelligence and security agency of those nations who condone the activity in their own sovereignties on their own people on more than one occasion. Namely Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia and Thailand. To you the witness, target, victim, stay alive, and soon justice will be yours, Australia's, and the so many of people whose life it has impacted, and your children will again have a father. To the anonymous members, you are outing the locations of this illegal government activity, for public safety and in hope of police and media intervention. Stay vigilant. We are behind you. This is anonymous. We do not forget. We do not forgive. Expect us. Arrived in Australia December of 2012, coming from Thailand, where the activity was much more sinister and malicious. In Thailand they had targeted an entire school and surrounding community, targeting even school children. This was not the first time or first country since that initial attack in Bandung, Indonesia. The individual at the heart of this, in his pursuit of justice and personal security, has prayed, hoped for, and been failed by the internal security of the sovereignties of Malaysia and Japan. Japan too has seen the targeting of school children. He was left no opportunity after the failure of the internal security of Thailand but to address the matter directly, which found him embarking alone to Australia. His arrival brought, given the scale and magnitude of what has been witnessed during the Walk Together March and the Million Mask March in Adelaide, we are here to out the vile history of this illegal activity and politicians whom have condoned the activity even upon witnessing it first-hand, firstly during question time in June and again several more times in September, as well as on public occasions. The target of this massive, very public illegal surveillance that encompasses an entire city and finds all in the immediate surroundings, victim to the amateur auditory annoyance along with harmful EMF bursts from telecommunications equipment, is a foreign national, a father, a school teacher whose only crime is his intimate knowledge of their criminal history for more than half a decade, throughout 4 other nations, on its civilians, including children, and with ability to implicate them in the near death of his daughter, whom survived a deadly burst of EMF thanks to his quick thinking and performance of CPR in Bandung, Indonesia, so many years ago now, on the 3rd of January 2009. Today in the present in Adelaide, South Australia, what you are seeing is the escalation of what began from a very isolated personal attack to a very public one, of a father, alone, now in the country of his birth after 2 years, and the failure of state and federal police, human rights organizations, OIGIS, the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence, to succession in leadership in your governments, and all members of the general public whom have met him since he arrived, experienced during the Walk Together March and again the Million Mask March 2014 in Adelaide, South Australia, has brought to our attention the illegal use of telecommunications equipment in the surveillance, defamation, abuse, harassment and annoyance of civilians and torture of one particular individual. Our investigations into these events have uncovered what is seemingly the worst case of human rights abuse we have heard of in recent times, and the first factual case that such technology has been used on civilians. A matter that concerns us all. We will not point fingers here at the governmental body committing the offense, for they are yet to be identified. This being said, they can only be of one source and possibly working together with the Defense Directorate. Greetings, citizens of the world. This is a message to Australia. A message to its leaders, government bodies and citizens. We have been following recent events in Australia and a handful of anonymous members who have been outing the location of illegal governmental activity on social media. This social media push on Twitter tags of Adelaide along with the occurrence of that illegal governmental activity that was a citywide surveillance of harassment and annoyance